On the 17th of November, 2001, a woman known to her neighbors in a quiet residential quarter of Limassol as Elena Rostov, a freelance maritime insurance assessor, calibrated the optics on a Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope pointed not at the heavens, but at the sprawling, chaotic expanse of the port below. The instrument was not for stargazing. Its high-resolution digital imaging sensor and custom software suite were designed for the specific purpose of capturing and analyzing the unique identifying marks of commercial vessels, rust patterns, weld seams on retrofitted hull plates, the precise placement of deck cranes, and the idiosyncratic wear on mooring bollards. To any observer, she was a meticulous professional engaged in the mundane but necessary work of risk assessment for a niche clientele. In reality, her name was not Elena, she had no connection to any insurance firm, and her client was not a corporation but a state. She was a field officer for the Israeli intelligence agency, Mossad, and her target was not a single ship, but a concept, the logistical chain of a weapons pipeline that was fueling the deadliest phase of the Second Intifada, a torrent of violence that threatened to escalate into a regional conflagration. Her carefully constructed life, from the half-finished watercolors of seascapes on her easel to the 2 adopted stray cats that provided a perfect cover for her irregular hours, was an elaborate piece of operational architecture designed for a single purpose, to identify the ghost ship that was funneling an arsenal from Iran to the Palestinian territories. The strategic problem confronting the Israeli intelligence community in the latter half of 2001 was one of escalating asymmetry and technological leapfrogging by their adversaries. The Second Intifada had metastasized from riots and suicide bombings into a low-grade guerrilla war, but intelligence suggested a significant evolution was imminent. Chatter intercepted by Unit 8200, the signals intelligence branch of the Israel Defense Forces, spoke of capabilities far beyond the Kalashnikovs and crude Qassam rockets that had defined the conflict thus far. The references were to anti-tank guided missiles, military-grade C-4 and Semtex explosives in quantities sufficient for catastrophic attacks on infrastructure, extended-range Katyusha rockets capable of striking major Israeli population centers, and even surface-to-air missiles that could threaten civilian aviation. This represented a qualitative shift in the threat matrix, transforming the conflict from a containable insurgency into a direct military threat to the state's strategic depth. The source of this impending arsenal was identified with high confidence as Iran, with facilitation and logistical support from Hezbollah, but the delivery mechanism remained an enigma. Conventional methods of interdiction had proven insufficient, the smuggling routes through the Sinai were porous and difficult to monitor comprehensively, and while individual caches were periodically discovered in Gaza and the West Bank, they were merely the terminal nodes of a much larger, more sophisticated network. The core challenge was that the weapons were not being moved in small, piecemeal shipments but were believed to be consolidated onto a single, large-tonnage vessel, mother ship, for the majority of the journey, before being broken down for final delivery. Finding this ship was paramount, yet it was akin to finding a single, specific grain of sand in a desert. The world's oceans were traversed by tens of thousands of commercial vessels at any given moment, and the smugglers were masters of obfuscation, using flags of convenience, shell corporations registered in jurisdictions with lax oversight, and forged shipping manifests that listed mundane cargo like textiles, machine parts, or agricultural products. Previous attempts to use satellite imagery alone had failed, as a ship's external appearance gave no clue to the nature of its concealed cargo, and the sheer volume of traffic made continuous tracking of all suspicious vessels a logistical impossibility. The intelligence failure was not one of collection, but of synthesis. They had thousands of pieces of a puzzle but no framework to assemble them. The stakes were absolute. Failure to sever this supply line would not only result in a dramatic increase in Israeli casualties, both civilian and military, but would also fundamentally alter the balance of power, forcing Israel into a large-scale military incursion into Palestinian cities, an action that would carry immense human cost and catastrophic diplomatic consequences. The architect of this ambitious weapons smuggling enterprise was Fuad Shabaki, a senior Palestinian Authority official and a close confidant of Yasser Arafat. Shabaki was not a typical militant commander, he was the PA's chief financial officer, a man who moved comfortably in the worlds of international banking and logistics. His profile, as constructed by Mossad's research division, was that of a methodical and patient planner, not a firebrand. He understood that the Intifada could not be won through sentiment alone, it required the tools of state-level warfare. His operational security was formidable. He rarely used electronic communication for sensitive matters, preferring face-to-face meetings with a small, tightly knit circle of trusted lieutenants. He leveraged the legitimate financial and logistical apparatus of the Palestinian Authority to create a deep cover for his illicit activities, commingling funds for arms purchases with legitimate government expenditures and using official PA diplomatic channels to facilitate travel and meetings. His network extended from the Fatah Tanzim militias on the ground to high-level contacts within Iran's Quds force and the upper echelons of Hezbollah. The challenge he presented was not that of a lone wolf or a decentralized terror cell, but of a state-sponsored entity operating with the discipline and resources of a national logistics agency. He had established a complex network of shell companies, primarily in Greece and Cyprus, to act as intermediaries for purchasing and chartering vessels. These companies had all the hallmarks of legitimacy: physical addresses, functioning phone lines, and a history of minor, legitimate shipping contracts to build a credible business profile. The crews hired for these operations were often unaware of the true nature of their cargo, recruited from international pools of merchant mariners who were paid a premium for what they were told were sensitive, but legal shipments. The core of Shabaki's strategy was compartmentalization. The team purchasing the weapons in Iran did not know the details of the ship that would carry them. The crew of the ship did not know the true identity of the cargo's owners. And the offloading team in the Red Sea would only be activated at the last moment. This intricate structure meant that the compromise of any single link in the chain would not automatically compromise the entire operation, making it exceptionally resilient to traditional human intelligence penetration. Faced with the failure of conventional tracking methods and the sophistication of Shabaki's network, a radical new proposal emerged from a joint working group of Mossad's Operations Directorate, SOMIT, and the IDF's Naval Intelligence Unit. The plan was codenamed Operation Noah's Ark. It was audacious not for its tactical complexity but for its legal and diplomatic ramifications. The proposal was to intercept and seize the target vessel on the high seas, in international waters, an act that bordered on piracy under maritime law and carried the risk of a significant international incident, particularly if the intelligence was wrong and the ship was found to be carrying legitimate cargo. The success of such an operation hinged on a standard of evidence that was absolute and irrefutable. It would not be enough to have a strong suspicion, they needed incontrovertible proof of the ship's identity, its illicit cargo, and its intended destination before any military action could be authorized. The solution proposed was a multi-layered intelligence fusion strategy. It would abandon the idea of finding a single, silver bullet source and instead focus on building a comprehensive, overlapping picture from dozens of disparate, seemingly insignificant data points. This meant deploying human assets not to penetrate Shabaki's inner circle, which was deemed too high-risk and time-consuming, but to monitor the periphery of his logistical network: the ports, the shipping agencies, the maritime legal firms, and the chandleries that supplied vessels in key transit hubs. The obstacle analysis was sobering. Technically, the operation required the real-time fusion of satellite imagery from OFEC series spy satellites, SIGINT from Unit 8200's listening posts, and human from field operatives like the woman in Limassol. This data would need to be processed and cross-referenced by a dedicated analytical team at Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv, working around the clock. Linguistically and culturally, it required operatives who could blend seamlessly into the cosmopolitan, polyglot world of international shipping, a subculture with its own jargon, customs, and codes of conduct. The greatest risk, however, was exposure. If an operative were compromised, it would not only endanger their life but could also alert Shabaki's network, causing them to change their methods and erase years of intelligence groundwork. The consequences of a failed seizure were even more dire: a diplomatic firestorm, accusations of Israeli aggression and piracy, and a potential strengthening of international support for the Palestinian cause, regardless of the underlying truth. The plan was a gamble of the highest order, one that required a level of certainty that intelligence work rarely affords. The technological and tactical preparations for Operation Noah's Ark were exhaustive and bespoke. At the core of the effort was the development of a proprietary data fusion platform by Mossad's technical division. This system, which had no official name but was internally nicknamed the Mosaic, was designed to ingest and correlate vast streams of information in real time. It pulled data from Global Automatic Identification System (AIS) transponders, which broadcast a ship's identity, position, and course, and cross-referenced it with satellite imagery. The system was programmed with algorithms to flag anomalies: a ship turning off its AIS in a high-interest area, a vessel meeting another ship at sea for a transshipment, or a cargo ship lingering off the coast of a state sponsor of terror like Iran. Simultaneously, Unit 8200 dedicated a significant portion of its resources to monitoring all communications related to maritime traffic in the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the Eastern Mediterranean. They focused on keywords related to specific types of cargo, port call arrangements, and financial transactions originating from Shabaki's known financial cutouts. For the eventual interdiction, the Israeli Navy's elite Shayetet 13 Commando Unit began rigorous training exercises. They practiced covert, nighttime boarding operations on container ships and bulk carriers in various sea states, refining their techniques for fast roping from helicopters and approaching from submerged delivery vehicles. A key tactical development was the creation of specialized inspection tools. Engineers designed a portable, high-density radiographic scanner, similar to those used for cargo inspection at major ports but miniaturized for use in a dynamic boarding scenario. This would allow the commandos to scan sealed containers at sea and confirm the presence of weapons without having to break them open immediately, preserving the evidence chain. They also developed specialized drills and cutting tools to access hidden compartments, as intelligence suggested the weapons would be concealed within false bulkheads or specially constructed, watertight cylinders designed to look like industrial pipes or machinery parts. Every element of the potential seizure was war-gamed, from the rules of engagement for handling a potentially hostile crew to the procedures for documenting every piece of evidence with video and still photography to ensure its admissibility in the court of international opinion. The human element of the operation centered on the recruitment and preparation of a small number of specialized field officers, or KOTSs. The operative who would become Elena Rostov was selected for this mission based on a unique combination of skills and a psychological profile indicating extreme resilience and patience. Her real name was classified at the highest level, but her service record showed a background in Israeli naval intelligence, where she had served as an analyst specializing in maritime traffic analysis. She was a fluent speaker of English, French, and Greek, with a working knowledge of Arabic and Farsi, a linguistic arsenal that made her an ideal candidate for operating in the Eastern Mediterranean's multicultural port cities. Her training for this specific assignment was intense and multifaceted. It began with a 3-month immersion course to perfect her cover as a maritime insurance assessor. She studied the intricacies of liability law, the methodologies for assessing hull integrity, and the complex paperwork associated with bills of lading and cargo insurance. She was trained by actual industry professionals who were brought in as consultants, their true purpose concealed from them. She learned to spot the subtle signs of a poorly maintained vessel, to understand the economic pressures on shipping lines, and to speak the language of premiums and deductibles with absolute authenticity. Concurrently, she underwent advanced tradecraft training. This included courses in defensive driving, surveillance detection routes, and the use of dead drops and encrypted short-range communication devices. A significant portion of her psychological conditioning focused on living the legend. She was taught techniques for compartmentalizing her true identity from her cover, to react naturally as Elena Rostov even when startled or under pressure. Her psychological profile was analyzed for any potential vulnerabilities, loneliness, a desire for recognition, or ethical qualms, that could be exploited by a hostile intelligence service or compromise the mission's integrity. Her motivation was rooted in a deep-seated ideological conviction, forged during her military service and sharpened by the relentless wave of suicide attacks that had terrorized Israeli civilians. She viewed her work not as espionage in the abstract, but as a direct, tangible act of defense, a way to prevent the weapons that would otherwise be used to kill her countrymen. This clinical detachment was deemed essential for the long, isolating months of surveillance that lay ahead. The construction of the Elena Rostov identity was a masterclass in the art of creating a legend. It began with the digital footprint. Mossad's technical specialists created a comprehensive online presence for her, dating back several years. This included a professional profile on a maritime industry networking site, mentions in the online archives of minor shipping industry newsletters, and a trail of low-level academic papers on risk management in commercial shipping supposedly authored by her during her university years. A shell company, Rostov Maritime Consulting, was legally registered in Cyprus, complete with a bank account that showed a history of plausible, small-scale transactions. A physical office address was secured, though it was little more than a mail drop. Her apartment in Limassol was carefully curated. The books on her shelves were a mix of Russian literature, to match her fabricated family background, dense tomes on maritime law, and popular fiction. The art supplies were not mere props. She had been trained to paint with a passable degree of skill, providing a justifiable and solitary hobby that explained hours spent at home. The adoption of the 2 stray cats was a particularly subtle but effective touch, suggested by a behavioral psychologist on the planning team. It made her seem more human, more permanent, and provided a powerful excuse to any curious neighbor for her odd schedule or for being seen near the port at unusual hours, claiming she was looking for a lost pet. Every detail was designed to withstand scrutiny. The wear patterns on the soles of her shoes, the type of tea in her kitchen, the receipts left in her wallet, all were consistent with the life of a single, slightly eccentric, but entirely plausible professional woman living and working in Cyprus. This deep, multi-layered cover was not just a disguise, it was a psychological fortress, allowing the operative to inhabit the role completely, thereby minimizing the cognitive load of maintaining a lie and reducing the risk of a behavioral slip that could unravel the entire operation. In the autumn of 2001, Elena Rostov was inserted into Limassol. Her initial phase was one of deliberate and painstaking normalcy. She spent weeks establishing a routine, frequenting the same cafes, grocery stores, and newsstands, allowing her presence to become a part of the local scenery. Her work was, at first, entirely legitimate. She took on a few minor, real consulting jobs for small shipping companies, sourced for her by the agency through cutouts, to build her reputation and provide a plausible source of income. This allowed her to integrate into the port community organically. She became a familiar face to harbor masters, customs officials, and shipping agents. Her professional inquiries about berthing schedules, cargo manifests, and crew rotations were seen as the normal due diligence of an insurance assessor. It was during these low-key interactions that she gathered the atmospheric intelligence the mission required. She learned which agents were known for their discretion, which customs officials were susceptible to bribery, and which companies specialized in handling sensitive or politically complicated cargo. She was not looking for a direct confession or a smoking gun. She was building a social and logistical map of the port, identifying the nodes of influence and the potential weak points in the system. Her reports back to Tel Aviv were sent via a sophisticated burst transmission device disguised as a portable hard drive. She would compose her encrypted messages offline, then connect the device to a public Wi-Fi network for a fraction of a second, just long enough to transmit the data packet to a Mossad-controlled server. The messages were a mosaic of observations, the name of a Lebanese-owned shipping agency that seemed to have unusually close ties to Iranian clients, the arrival of a new crew of Yemeni sailors known for their willingness to work on no-questions-asked voyages, the scuttlebutt about a particular vessel, the Karine, which had recently been purchased for cash by a newly formed, unknown entity and was undergoing a hurried refit in a secluded corner of the harbor. The build-up to the operation's climax began when a single piece of intelligence from Elena's stream of observations converged with a critical intercept from Unit 8200. Elena had noted that the Karine, a 4,000-ton general cargo ship, had been re-registered under a Tongan flag of convenience, a common tactic for obfuscating ownership. More importantly, she observed through her telescope that the crew was not a typical international mix but consisted primarily of men who appeared to be Palestinian, including its captain, Omar Akawi, a senior member of the Fatah movement. At the same time, Unit 8200 intercepted a fragmented but crucial satellite phone call between Fuad Shabaki and a contact in Iran. The call referenced a big wedding and a dowry of 50 toys, coded language that analysts, referencing a library of past intercepts, interpreted to mean a major weapons shipment of approximately 50 tons. The timing of the call coincided with the Karine A's final preparations to sail. The Mosaic system flagged the convergence as a high-probability match. From that moment, the Karine A became the primary target. A dedicated team of analysts in Tel Aviv was assigned to track its every move. OFEC satellite passes were tasked to provide imaging of the ship and its intended route. Elena's mission shifted from general observation to focused surveillance. She documented the loading of what appeared to be legitimate cargo during the day, but her long-range photography also captured pallets of unmarked, heavy crates being loaded under the cover of darkness, a significant deviation from standard port procedure. The ship's declared destination was Libya, a plausible but ultimately false itinerary. Once it cleared the Suez Canal and entered the Red Sea, the Karine A went dark, turning off its AIS transponder. But it was too late. Mossad and naval intelligence were now tracking it continuously via satellite. They watched as it rendezvoused with a smaller vessel off the Iranian coast, near Kish Island, a known hub for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. High-resolution imagery, though unable to see the cargo itself, showed a classic ship-to-ship transfer, consistent with the loading of heavy materials. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when another intelligence source confirmed the nature of the cargo, 83 massive, watertight containers. The plan was for the Karine A to anchor in the international waters of the Red Sea, where the containers would be submerged and attached to buoys with minimal radar signature. Smaller Palestinian fishing boats, dispatched from the Egyptian coast, would then retrieve the containers one by one and smuggle them into Gaza. The waiting period was tense. The order to intercept could only be given when the ship was at its most distant point from any sovereign territory, to minimize the diplomatic fallout. For days, the Hijacked 13 commandos remained on high alert aboard Israeli Navy missile boats, shadowing the Karine A from over the horizon, waiting for the precise moment to strike. At 4:45 on the 3rd of January, 2002, in the placid waters of the Red Sea, approximately 500 kilometers from the Israeli coast, the order was given. The execution of the seizure was a model of military precision. 2 Israeli Air Force Black Hawk helicopters, flying low over the waves to avoid radar detection, converged on the unsuspecting Karine A. Simultaneously, 2 high-speed Zodiac Hurricane inflatable boats, carrying the main Hijacked 13 assault force, closed in from the ship's stern. The commandos fast-roped onto the deck with overwhelming speed and precision, their night vision goggles cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. The ship's crew of 13 was secured within minutes, without a single shot being fired. The captain, Omar Akawi, was taken completely by surprise in the wheelhouse. As the vessel was secured, the second phase of the operation began, the search for the evidence. The commandos, guided by the intelligence reports, immediately located the 83 specialized containers. They were stored in the ship's main hold, concealed beneath tons of legitimate cargo, including textiles, toys, and medical supplies, which were intended to be presented to any cursory customs inspection. Using the portable radiographic scanner, they confirmed the contents were not what the manifest claimed. The team then systematically opened several of the containers in front of video cameras. The arsenal they revealed was staggering, confirming the worst fears of the intelligence analysts. They found dozens of 122mm Katyusha rockets with a range of over 20 kilometers, hundreds of mortar shells of various calibers, nearly 2 tons of high-grade C4 and TNT explosives, hundreds of Sagar anti-tank missiles, RPGs, and thousands of rifles and rounds of ammunition. The total weight of the illicit arms was over 50 tons. Every item was catalogued, its serial numbers recorded, and its Iranian origin documented. The ship's logbook and navigation charts were seized, providing a clear record of its journey from Iran. The entire operation, from the initial assault to the complete documentation of the cargo, was concluded in under 2 hours. The Karine A was then commandeered by the Israeli Navy and began its slow journey north to the port of Eilat. As the commandos were securing the Karine A in the Red Sea, Elena Rostov was executing her own final, meticulously planned maneuver. Her extraction protocol was designed for silence and invisibility. An hour after receiving a coded, "Mission Complete" signal, a seemingly innocuous advertisement that appeared on a specific page of an online Greek newspaper, she began the process of erasing herself. She wiped the hard drives of her computers using a military-grade data destruction program. She gathered the small amount of mission-specific hardware, the encrypted communicator, the specialized camera lenses, and sealed them in a waterproof bag. Later that day, during a walk along a coastal path, she dropped the bag into a deep, pre-surveyed underwater crevice. She then made a series of perfectly normal-looking bank withdrawals, emptying her operational accounts. Her final act in the apartment was to arrange for a local animal welfare organization to pick up her 2 cats, leaving a generous donation and a note explaining that she had to leave the country unexpectedly for a family emergency. She packed a single suitcase with the clothes and personal effects that were part of her cover, leaving everything else behind. She drove her modest car to Larnaca International Airport, but she did not board a plane. Instead, she left the car in the long-term parking lot, a common practice that would not raise suspicion for days or even weeks. She then took a local bus back to a different town, where she checked into a small hotel under a secondary, short-term identity. The next morning, she took a ferry to a neighboring country using a different passport. From there, a series of further, indirect journeys eventually led her back to Israel. The identity of Elena Rostov, the meticulous maritime insurance assessor from Limassol, ceased to exist. She had been a ghost, and now she was gone. The aftermath of the Karine A's seizure was as significant as the intelligence operation that enabled it. The immediate impact was the prevention of 50 tons of advanced weaponry from entering the theater of conflict, a haul that would have unquestionably led to a massive escalation in violence and casualties. The Palestinian Authority, under Yasser Arafat, issued an immediate and vehement denial, claiming the affair was a fabrication by Israeli intelligence designed to discredit him. However, the evidence presented by Israel was overwhelming and irrefutable. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's government orchestrated a masterful public relations campaign. They flew hundreds of international journalists and military attaches to the port of Eilat, where the full contents of the Karine A were laid out for inspection. The serial numbers on the mortars traced back to Iranian military stockpiles. The ship's captain, Omar Akawi, provided a detailed confession on camera, implicating Fuad Shabaki and other senior PA officials directly. Most damning of all were the shipping documents found on board, some of which were personally signed by Shabaki. The long-term strategic value of this intelligence coup was immense. It shattered the carefully cultivated image of Yasser Arafat as a partner for peace, particularly in the eyes of the United States and Europe. President George W. Bush, who had previously been sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, reportedly felt personally betrayed. The operation provided concrete proof of the direct link between the Palestinian Authority, Iran, and the global terror network, a connection that had previously been asserted by Israel but often dismissed as propaganda. This shift in international perception gave Israel significant diplomatic latitude to conduct subsequent defensive operations in the West Bank. The political repercussions were profound and lasting, fundamentally altering the dynamics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and isolating Arafat on the world stage. For the operative once known as Elena, the consequences were more personal and silent. She returned to the anonymous corridors of Mossad headquarters, her contribution celebrated only within the windowless, secure rooms where such operations are born. The psychological cost of her deep cover mission was significant. The process of de-rolling, of shedding the constructed identity and re-inhabiting her own, was disorienting. She was a problem solver who had executed her task with clinical perfection, but the mission had transformed her, leaving an indelible mark on her identity. The success of Operation Noah's Ark was a public victory for her country, but her role in it would forever remain a classified secret, a silent testament to the solitary, high-stakes world of intelligence, where the most significant victories are the ones the world never sees. What is the true moral calculus of an operation that violates international maritime norms to prevent a greater, more certain bloodshed? At what point does the imperative for national self-defense justify actions that, in another context, might be labeled as acts of aggression themselves? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel.